morning to everyone. Today, I, Dr. Vijay Raj Singh, as coordinator of Science Lecture Series 2, take this opportunity to welcome you all to the webinar by the Physics Department at Central University of South Bihar. Honorable Speaker, Professor Preeti Bhobe, respected Head of Department, and my dear friends. I extend a warm welcome to you and participants for this webinar today. We all have gathered here for a webinar on a very interesting topic, that is tin selenide, a new thermonic material in town. I assure you all that you will truly enjoy this session and will definitely take some learnings home today. Now I request Head of Department, Professor Venkatesh Singh, who is the chairman of this session, to introduce our esteemed guest of today's webinar and request her to present her talk. Professor Venkatesh Singh.
Thank you, Vijay Rajji. Hello, everyone. Namaste and very good morning. This is Venkatesh of Central University of South Bihar, Gaya. Today, I welcome all of you on behalf of the organizing team of this virtual science lecture series, which is organized by the Department of Physics, School of Physical and Chemical Sciences, Central University of South Bihar, Gaya. I would like to thank all the online participants for showing their interest and taking part in the session 2, 7th lecture of this science lecture series 2020. Today, we have the pleasure of having one of the renowned scientists, a teacher, a physicist, a dynamic researcher, Professor Preeti Anand Bhobe from Indian Institute of Technology, Indore, with us. I welcome you, ma'am, to this science lecture series on behalf of the organizing team and on my behalf. Professor Preeti ji will speak on tin selenide, a new thermoelectric material in town. Professor Preeti earned her doctorate degree from Goa University, Goa. She was JSPS postdoctoral fellow at Institute of Solid State Physics at University of Tokyo in Japan. Professor Preeti ji was visiting researcher at Texas A&M University, Texas, USA. Presently, she is Associate Professor of Physics in IIT Indore. Professor Preeti ji is well-traveled and internationally well-known figure in her area of research. I hope today's lecture will motivate master's students towards solid-state physics. I sincerely believe that this lecture would draw huge attention of the knowledge-loving undergraduate and postgraduate physics student, as well as young and dynamic faculties connected virtually in this lecture to listen her. As I have always mentioned before each lecture, that our speakers are internationally renowned and real gems of their area. Therefore, they do not need detailed introduction. However, for the curious young and motivated participants, we have already uploaded her very short CV on the science lecture website and Facebook. Dear participants, colleagues and friends, if you have any queries and questions related to this lecture, please write them down in the chat box. At the end of this lecture, Secretary of the Science Lecture Series, Dr. Puneet Misra ji, will ask your question on your behalf. Once again, I welcome you, ma'am, and we are really grateful to you for accepting our request of delivering today's lecture, sharing your knowledge and time with us from your busy schedule. With these few words, I would like to request Professor Preeti Anand Bhobe ji to please deliver her talk on this tin selenide, a thermoelectric material in town. Professor Preeti Bhobe ji, please deliver your talk.
Thank you very much, Professor Venkatesh, for that lovely introduction. Though I don't deserve so much of praise. Thank you very much. It's my honor to be here, to be delivering a lecture to a large number of students of Central University of South Bihar. especially the students of physics and the discipline of basic sciences. Thank you also, Professor Vijay, for inviting me and for this session. And I will now talk about a material that we have been studying in our lab for quite some time now. I have tried to base my talk somewhere in between the levels of for an undergraduate student and an early researcher. Of course, if you need, during my talk or even after my talk, if you feel that you need more nuanced discussion, we should do so. Okay. So let me begin. So the title of my talk, I have named it as tin selenide, and I've called it as a new thermoelectric material in town. And I'll tell you why I justify both this the parts of the title in my following slides. So as I said, I've named my title as tin selenide, a new thermoelectric material in town, and I will justify why it is a new material and why tin selenide in the following slides. Before I do that, let me tell you that this work is done by this PhD scholar in my group. His name is Gautam Raju. And this is my team entirely of my research students whom I should actually acknowledge because they all have been collectively working in our study of thermoelectrics. I have received fundings also for this work from DST, from IIT Indore itself, and from CSIR. And I've been collaborating with some national labs like TIFR and RRCAT, and abroad at Texas A&M University in US and Hanover University in Germany. Okay, so done with the introduction and the acknowledgement. Let's go and see why do we need to know this field of thermoelectrics. Now we know there are different sources of obtaining energy from natural gas, or in factories we use it, or we burn some waste and we get energy from there. We use our automobiles, we use nuclear plants, and we use thermal plants, and all we expect that we get energy from these sources, and we try to carry out all our known day-to-day processes that you are aware of. Okay. But what we need to focus is that though we have so many primary sources of energy, the input that we give and the output we get is what decides our profit in the system. And what we realize is that all these resources, we are able to tap only around 34% of useful energy. The rest of the energy goes away as a loss in terms of heat. Okay, a lot of it is wasted as heat. And in spite of that loss, you see whatever we are gaining is giving us so much of energy around to use in all spheres of our life. Today we cannot think of our life without any such energy processes that are shown in this figure here. But having known also that we have a limited supply of the fuel as such, so we need to look at alternative sources of energy, and that is why nowadays we once talks about recyclable or renewable sources or alternative sources like solar or biofuels and things like that are being talked about. At the same time, one says that okay, when we put this energy to use, we also lose some energy in terms of heat, and if we can use even a small part of this heat again, then we will be able to decrease our loss of 66%, which is shown here. Even if we can bring the 66%, some amount of it into useful energy, then we are actually talking about recycling of the waste heat. Okay, and that is where people started focusing on these materials called as thermoelectrics. What textbook definitions in schools or early science textbooks tells us is that thermoelectric is a process in which if you have a material which is maintained at two different temperatures, then the charge carriers will flow from hot end to the cold end, and if we try to measure the voltage drop across such a material, then we will get some finite voltage. This kind of process, this is what basic information we understand from thermoelectrics. So to make use of it, what we would have to do is have some material which we can put in contact with the loss of heat, and that loss of heat will make the current flow in the material, and that current flow we can tap to do various things. So if you had to just Google these things up and see what are the some of the applications of thermoelectrics, then you will be placed, or you will see such kind of figures when you Google on the internet. Basically, what it will tell you, that BMW is trying to make such kind of a car where whatever heat is generated in the engine, if we use thermoelectric materials to make the interior of this car in terms of its seats or door linings or things like that, then one can have some temperature reduction inside. See, what it will do is it will absorb the heat and convert it into some useful energy. And what useful energy? It could use it as a cooling system inside the car. Okay, it could have so that means that you put less pressure on the central cooling AC system of the car. Your seats will naturally get cooled. Then you will feel comfortable when you're sitting in this car because the temperature will be maintained. Another use they often show or even available in the market are the wrist watches, which will work on the body heat. They'll absorb your body heat and the batteries inside will get charged, and you will have a device which will not require an external kind of a stimulus to charge it. Okay, it will just use your body heat. There are applications which are showing that, okay, one can go camping and use some fire, whatever you lit at the camp, you can use that heat and have a light source for you, or you could charge your mobile phone and things like that. And these are various things you will see on the internet. Another interesting thing that nowadays is being talked about, making a fabric, which is shown in the leftmost corner here on top, a fabric made from thermoelectric material. And what they claim is, like you wear a raincoat in a rainy day and you expect that, okay, the water will not go into your body. Same way you could make a jacket of a thermoelectric material and maybe wear it in the summers. Then the heat outside, it will absorb and it will change the temperature from in the inner side of the jacket, and so your jacket will actually cool you. Okay, the more heat it is outside, the more it will cool you. So some things like this are being talked about. But one has to not forget that since early 60s or early 50s, thermoelectric is efficiently and very widely used in our solar explorations. Okay, NASA used it first, and following that all the other satellite technologies use thermoelectric materials to power the whatever small electronics they have attached to the satellites. What it does is it takes the energy from the sun rays and all, and thermoelectric materials have been put on these kind of satellites, and it has been running efficiently till date. Whatever NASA has been had installed at that time, it still runs in the early 50s and 60s. It's still operational. Same is with Indian space satellites also. There are many circuits that are powered by the thermoelectric materials. Also, if you go on Amazon and try to buy a thermoelectric material, you will get this kind of a device. It's popularly known as Peltier cooler because it works on the opposite effect. Basically, Seebeck and Peltier effect. These are basic things. Maybe in your 11th, 12th, you know what I'm talking about. So you will basically, this device will help cool the temperature. And so if you try and search on Amazon, maybe for 200 or 300 rupees, you will get this kind of a device, which is basically 1 inch by 1 inch. And you can do various experiments by just powering it with some battery or something. And you can do wonderful small experiments if you are a science enthusiast. What exactly is there inside this Peltier cooler or any of the thermoelectric device? Basically, if we try to break it up and watch it under microscope, what exactly you will see is some kind of this kind of arrangement that is shown in this figure here. So if I take this kind of a Peltier cooler and break it open, what I'll get is this kind of a blocks, which are red and green colored blocks shown here, and the way they are connected, they are thermally connected at some places and then they are electrically connected at some places. Thermally connected in the sense, see, there is a heat absorption pad, white pad on top, and there are electrical connections on down, but the two legs, they are called as legs, the green leg and the red leg, they are not connected electrically. The way it runs is like it is shown in this cartoon here. So there is a heat source on top and you make a P type of thermoelectric and an N type of thermoelectric legs like this. So one of them is the red leg, one of them is the green leg. It will absorb the heat. These charge carriers will move. As they move, they will generate some heat. Okay, or they will generate some current, and that can be used across a resistor or a light bulb or whatever you want to. One can play with it. This is how what lies in the heart of the device. The next sensible question for us to ask is, how do I know which materials are better, are the ones which I have to use for thermoelectric, or is it that the entire periodic table is available to me to use? All the elements present in the periodic table, can I use all of them? These are the questions that come to mind. But before that question we answer, we have to know what is the efficiency of this kind of a thermoelectric material, and why are we not replacing all our known gadgets with this very friendly, environmental friendly device? Well, the question answer lies in this chart. Now you know the best efficiency, theoretical efficiency you can get from thermodynamics is your Carnot engine. Now all other systems we know, not only thermoelectrics, but all other kinds of systems we know of energy generation, they lie at much lower efficiency than the Carnot engine efficiency. And how is this determined? It is determined by something called as a figure of merit, and it is called as represented by a number ZT. I'll come to this what ZT is in the following slide. But you have to understand that if thermoelectric processes tell us that heat, these are very interchangeable, reversible processes, then why are we having any loss at all? If I have a material that can put to use some heat that was anyway going waste and decreasing the efficiency of the system, now I am saying that I have a material which can use that heat, then why is still there a loss, and why we are not able to achieve the Carnot efficiency? Well, the reason also lies in the other properties of the material. When we are saying we have a material that can convert heat into useful energy, we have to also know that that same material will have some electrical resistance, it will have some thermal conduction, it will have its atom placed in a particular way, its crystal structure will play a role, and the way the material is manufactured, whether it will have defects, whether it will have grain boundaries, all these things will contribute in us getting a much more output from that particular material. So the material's chemistry or the material's solid state physics becomes very interesting there, and that is where we come into picture in understanding how to gain maximum benefit from the particular material and make it more and more useful for thermoelectric energy conversion. Okay. And for that, what physicists or any of the scientists working in materials of such have found that you have to have this proper definition of ZT, or a figure of merit of a thermoelectric material. That is one that will tell you what is the quality, how good that material is to be used as thermoelectric. Now ZT is basically a combination of the factors that are written in this box equation here. It is basically a product of the Seebeck coefficient, electrical conductivity, and it is divided by the thermal conductivity. The temperature T is multiplied on both sides of Z here, ZT and here T. It's basically to balance the dimensions of the parameters, all other factors that are there in sigma, in S and K. S, as I said, is a Seebeck coefficient. Its dependence is seen on the effective mass of the material, and it's inversely proportional to the density of electrons. Okay, carrier concentration. Whatever carrier concentration we have, Seebeck coefficient will be inversely proportional to it, and it will be directly proportional to the m star, the effective mass. Similarly, conductivity, electrical conductivity sigma, or other known physics people normally prefer to write the resistivity, or 1 by sigma, which is the rho. But it's interchangeable, you have to understand it. So sigma is nothing but n is n e tau. Similarly, the thermal conductivity, which is the denominator here, it is consisting of two parts, the lattice thermal conductivity and the electronic part of the conductivity. The electronic part of the conductivity again is related to the electrical conductivity by the equation known as the Wiedemann-Franz law, which tells us that ratio of electrical conductivity to thermal conductivity is a constant called as Lorentz number. This is what our basic solid state physics tells us about the parameters of kappa, sigma and S. Okay, and the combination of all these three in the equation shown here decides the figure of merit or performance of a known thermoelectric material. Now there is a catch now here. See, if I want a good thermoelectric material, I need to have a higher ZT, and if I want to have a higher ZT, that means that looking at this equation, you know that if I want a higher ZT, then ideally I should have a material with high sigma and high S and a very low K. If I have low number in the denominator and high numbers in the numerator, definitely my ZT will be high. But there is still a catch. When you try to increase sigma, say electrical conductivity here, sigma, which is how will you increase sigma? You will increase the electronic concentration, N. Carrier concentration I will increase. You should say, okay, better metal I take, good metal like copper or silver or gold, not gold, sorry, copper if I take, then my sigma should be high. Moment I do sigma high, my S is inversely proportional to N. So if I take very good metal, then S will go down, Seebeck coefficient will go down. Also, if I take a very good metal, I know its K is very high. Thermal conductivity is good for copper and all. So if this number becomes large, then ZT will be pulled down. So what one realizes is that all this S, sigma and K are all interrelated. Okay, so you cannot increase one and expect that the other property will not increase or decrease. It will get affected. And that is why it is not so easy a game to increase the ZT of a given thermoelectric material. So what people found was that if I take the Seebeck coefficient S and try to plot it here in the x-axis, you see the carrier concentration, and on the y-axis if I put Seebeck coefficient, or on the y-axis if I put electrical conductivity, or I put thermal conductivity K in the lower panel here, and try and see how these values are changing with respect to my carrier concentration change, which is represented here as a log n, then one sees that Seebeck coefficient is the blue line, which will decrease as the number of concentration of electrons increases or carrier concentration increases. Whereas conductivity, we know as the number of carriers increase, conductivity will increase. And similarly, K will increase, the K electronic will increase with conduction electrons. K lattice will not get affected so much, it will remain almost there, stable compared to what change we say in K electric. So depending on all these three factors, it was found that an ideal sort of increase in ZT can be obtained when you have a carrier concentration that lies between 10 raised to 19 to 10 raised to 21 centimeters cube. So basically, if one sees that if this is the golden number in which you can get a good ZT, then which are the materials that qualify in this region? These are the semiconducting materials. Okay, semiconducting materials are known to have electronic concentration or charge concentration that lies in the value of 10 raised to 19 to 10 raised to 21. Metals like copper and all are higher, 10 raised to 22 and higher. Insulators will have 10 raised to 14, 15, 16, 10, much below than 10 raised to 19. So the ideal number to get a good ZT lies in the region of 10 raised to 19 to 10 raised to 21. And so scientists started looking at materials that will have this kind of concentration. It is also known that to improve now the figure of merit, you have to focus on your electron concentration as well as the phonon concentration, because phonons are your lattice vibrations. It is a term that is coming in the denominator, the thermal conductivity term that comes in the denominator. So if one talks from solid state point of view, which are the factors that will actually control our electrical conductivity, Seebeck coefficient and thermal conductivity? We know that electrical conductivity can be changed or modulated by having different crystal orientation, making different compositions, and things like that will affect our electrical conductivity. Seebeck conductivity coefficient will also get affected if you try and play with the carrier concentration and the band levels in the material. Thermal conductivity, on the other hand, is very sensitive to defects, vacancies. If you make nanostructures, then also one can see that there is an effect on thermal conductivity. So keeping all these factors in mind, till date, from the early 50s to till date, there have been a large number of materials that have been found to be thermoelectric. And here is a general table which was, I've taken this from a review article up to 2016. So it lists the materials that are known from early 60s, 1960s to now, 2016. And you can see that there are various materials with ZT against, how much ZT or how much usability figure of merit that we could make from this material is listed here. Early 60s were using your bismuth telluride, bismuth selenide kind of semiconductors. From there, its ZT was very less, 0.5 or something. From there, the improvement started in early 90s, and people started making nanomaterials. People started making combination of different thermoelectric materials in the basic bismuth telluride systems, and they improved the ZT. But again, for a long time, till 2012, 13, it had reached a stability sort of thing. There was no further rise. Till then, another new material started coming up in the early 2010, 2012 era. And not only bismuth telluride, people started looking for different combinations. Like you can see here half Heusler's, you can see here PBSE, copper selenides and copper sulfides and many kinds of things. But interestingly, what happened was there were also silicon germanium alloys and scutaldites and oxides and various other materials that were known. Interestingly, in 2014, there was a material that crossed all these boundaries along the y-axis. If you see, the highest numbers are coming around a material shown here in blue, which is the SNSE, the tin selenide material. It basically crossed all the boundaries and showed the highest ZT known to us till date. Okay. And that tin selenide, that is why is a celebrated material. It was published in Nature in 2014, and it showed a ZT of around 2.5, which is the highest ZT till date known for thermoelectric materials, highest figure of merit. So the question was like, why this material is having such a high ZT? The people, scientists who reported this, the US group in 2014, they claimed they made single crystals as shown in this photograph here. They made single crystals of this material, and they showed that the single crystal of this material were having they were not adiabatic. The properties of the material were not isotropic along the different axes of the A, B, C axis of this material. You were getting different properties of its electrical and thermal conductivities. The interesting thing was that it had broken all the barriers known to thermoelectric materials and was showing highest thermoelectric material. When they studied the properties, they realized that it was a very low thermal conductivity. Actually, it was called as ultra low thermal conductivity. It was a very small value, 0.46, 0.7, 0.68 along the three axes of it. And because of this low thermal conductivity, if you remember the ZT equation, the denominator going very low here, its ZT was going very high. Other than this property, what was interesting about tin selenide was that it was relatively non-toxic because it did not have elements like lead or tellurium in it. Okay, the ones which were there in bismuth telluride systems and lead-doped bismuth telluride. Also, tin and selenium being less costly, they were low-cost, high-efficiency materials. These were the P-type of material. They were found that this semiconductor is a P-type semiconductor, and it had a nice tunable energy band gap. Okay, so all these properties were very fascinating to actually go ahead and have this material as a thermoelectric. And that is how the crystal structure of it looks. It's basically has the low thermal conductivity of this material comes from its layered kind of structure. If you see this structure, it's a zigzag kind of a structure. And each of these zigzag planes are basically held by van der Waals interactions. That the one line of atoms is there, one zigzag line is there, but that line is over another line, but there is no strong bonding between the two lines, two layers. There is a van der Waals attraction between the layers. And this van der Waals interaction between the layers is what is basically giving rise to its very low thermal conductivity. Okay, because the phonons cannot propagate and the lattice thermal conductivity really reduces. The phonons cannot propagate easily. Heat cannot be conveyed from one part to the another in this material, and hence it pulls down the ZT. Pulls down the thermal conductivity and increases the ZT. But there is a catch now. We were like, oh, very good, wonderful. We have a single crystal which is showing such a nice thermal conductivity and it will revolutionize our thermoelectrics. But that does not happen because when you try to do a polycrystalline of this material, then the polycrystalline ZT is around 0.5, like shown here. Okay, though it is single crystal is showing a ZT of around 2.5, if polycrystalline it is coming down to something like 0.5. And the reason being that, you know, in a polycrystalline form, you are losing this layered phonon propagation is much easier, and electrical conductivity gets affected, Seebeck conductivity gets affected, Seebeck coefficient gets affected. All these parameters are getting into the line of getting major decrease in the ZT. So what people scientists decided, and mind you, this was in 2014 itself. So scientists decided that, okay, let us see if I want to increase this ZT, which is the factor that is most getting affected here. They found, okay, conductivity is getting affected. If conductivity, electrical conductivity is getting affected, let me try and put some metal like Ag, which is silver, and try and see if I can improve the conductivity. Or let us try and play around with other chemistry of this material and try and improve its ZT. And from there on, the game started of improving the ZT of this material, either by improving its electrical conductivity or doing something to its thermal conductivity or Seebeck coefficient. And that is what is the this is the introduction to ZT that I'm talking about. And let me tell you how we in our lab tried to increase the ZT of SNSE. So our objective was somehow to increase the ZT. We took 4 different approaches for this. We prepared nano, because we know that having nano materials in general, we know that once you have a nano form of any material, there is a lot of control one can have on the different physical properties of such materials. The strategy we did was we tried to put in copper. In the second strategy, we tried to put in copper because copper is known to improve, is a good electrical conductor. So we thought maybe a small amount of copper would help us in improving the ZT. But what we found was modulation of crystal structures, and also the other 2 approaches. I'm going to come one by one. But when I start here, let me not start with the nano first. I'll tell you why I don't do it I'll come to it towards the end of my talk and tell you what happens in the nano materials. Let us start first with the copper doping. So what happens when one tries to put copper in SNSE? What we realized is that you cannot put a lot of copper in it. We put 1%, 5%, okay. But moment you increase from 5% and try to go higher, then you start getting some secondary phases, or copper forms some different compounds with selenium, and so it comes out as a secondary phase in this. Well, whether it is good, bad is another thing, but it's not helping us to achieve the aim of putting copper in SNSE. It only tells us that only up to 5% copper you can put without actually disturbing the crystal structure of SNSE. If you try to put more copper, it will try to come out of the system and form its own secondary phase. But the amazing thing that we see is that the change in microstructure. This is a microstructure for the right topmost corner figure shows you the microstructure for a 1% doped copper. And moment you go to 8% copper, the microstructure has changed completely. You get, and mind you, the scale is the same of magnification, 200 nanometer scale. And you see a complete change in microstructure. And this drastic effect on, we were surprised whether this really plays a role or no in SNSE. But what we realized is that when we try and study this material, what happens to the transport properties, the electrical conductivity of it? Obviously, if you are putting copper, then you expect that the electrical conductivity will improve or resistivity will come down. And that's what we see here. The black curve is that of SNSE in this figure here, where resistivity is plotted as a function of temperature. And as you put in copper, you you slowly start decreasing the electrical resistivity. So that aim is achieved, that we were saying that, okay, SNSE, if you put copper, we will have a better conductivity, electrical conductivity. And that is what is happening, we see here. If you also look at the charge carrier concentration from the Hall effect measurements, like shown in the lower right panel here in the figure, then we see that the black curve is for SNSE. Compared to the black curve, initially when you put very little copper, suddenly the slope changes. It is showing a decrease in the carrier concentration. And that's just for 1%. Maybe it is because it generates some internal strains and things in the crystal unit cell. But as you increase the concentration higher, the slope of the curve changes. Okay, and it is coming, the blue and the green curves. Green curve in fact indicates that if I had to put little more copper, then maybe this green curve would go in the next quadrants. and I would have got electrons as my major carrier rather than holes. What it tells me is that, please remember, SNSE is a p-type conductor. As I put in more and more copper, I am putting more and more electrons in the system, and they may be quenching the holes present in the system, and that is what is getting reflected in the change in the conductivity of the material. If we look at the Seebeck coefficient, corresponding Seebeck coefficient does come down. So what did I achieve then? If my Seebeck coefficient comes down, then my thermal efficiency is coming, the performance of thermoelectric is coming down, but not necessary. The overall performance will be measured by ZT, the relative change. Okay, so Seebeck coefficient individually, if you see, compared to SNSE, which was having a value of around 400, it comes to half of the value at around 200 for when you put in copper. But the thermal conductivity, because you are putting a metal, thermal conductivity improves. And the improvement is basically because of the electrical part of thermal conductivity. Interestingly, its effective mass in the band structure almost remains it follows a single parabolic structure. So in the band structure as such, copper is not really doing drastic changes in the Seebeck to affect the Seebeck coefficient of the material. And hence, now if I look at the ZT, I do get an improvement in the ZT for 10% copper, but I have to keep in, or 8% copper, but I have to keep in mind that comes at a cost of having some small copper impurities of the second phase also forming in. But that should not stop you from bothering too much, because the ZT, normally in all this thermoelectric material research, what is important is how good a ZT of the material is. So if compared to your pure SNSE, by putting copper, my ZT has improved, then it has improved. I have to only tell what are the reasons for its improvement. The reasons for its improvement here, we realize that it is not any of the factors that are affecting the thermal conductivity or electrical conductivity. It's basically the morphology. If you remember in my first slides of this, I said that the morphology changes a lot. Because this morphology changes a lot, the scattering of phonons changes a lot from one grain to another, and that is what is giving rise to very low thermal conductivity and hence a good ZT for my materials. So copper doping enriches the thermoelectric properties of SNSE due to its amphoteric nature and forming this microstructure. Having done this, the obvious next question is, if copper is a good dopant, then can I use other elements and see, like copper, are there any other elements that I can use in the study and see that my microstructure is improved and it helps me improve the ZT. If with this aim we try and see the periodic table and which are the other materials, and let me this time keep my concentration fixed. Let me say, I know from my copper experience that beyond 5%, if I try to put some other foreign material in SNSE, then it gives rise to impurity peak. So let me stick to 5% and say I won't cross 5%, but I will change different kinds of elements. So what are the choices one has that one can replace this SN? I could put some SB in it, antimony, which is the neighbor of SN, or one could go to put germanium or indium. And if one wants to see the effect of copper in the system, instead of copper, could I put nickel or could I put cobalt? These are the obvious questions which come to mind. And based on this, when we prepared the 5% sample, we realized that antimony or germanium is not a good choice for 5%. It does not go, germanium rather does not go beyond 3% in the SNSE without giving an impurity phase. Same is the case with SB. It forms another secondary compound with selenium. And so what we are left with are the very limited choices of indium, nickel and cobalt, which will give you pure systems. There is the XRD which tells us a very phase pure material is formed. And if one looks at the microstructure, because that was the interest, no, that the microstructure has changed drastically when we had put in copper. So what happens to the microstructure when we are talking about doping like copper, so cobalt, nickel or indium? But what to our surprise we found was that unlike the case in copper, we do not find any microstructure change in these dopants, in cobalt or in nickel or in indium doping. There is no microstructure change. This layered structure of the material is maintained. The microstructure is the same in all the materials. But what happens, and neither has its lattice constants and volume of the unit cell changing. It is also fine. But what is happening is the carrier concentration changes. What we find is that SNSE has a particular resistivity versus temperature, but with increase in, by putting in cobalt or nickel or indium, the resistivity increases. We were expecting that when we put metals like cobalt or nickel, it should come down, but here we are seeing an increase in the resistivity. So, you know, we immediately know that resistivity has increased, so conductivity has gone down. This is going to have adverse effect on our ZT. But that's not going to stop a physicist from determining what are the factors that is bringing up the resistivity or bringing it down. We have to do a proper analysis. What we find is from the Hall effect studies is that the carrier concentration is getting affected to a large extent. In case of indium sample, you see indium, the carrier concentration is really low compared to the black curve here, which is SNSE. Whereas with cobalt and nickel, also the electrical concentration is coming down, and this is challenging to our thought, because we were thinking we are putting in metals and yet we are having a decrease in the carrier concentration. And but otherwise, if we just look at the carrier concentration and resistivity alone without thinking too much, then we see that okay, TK, carrier concentrations have gone down, so my resistivity has gone up. Nothing to challenge here. But if we see the Seebeck coefficient is also drastically affected. Okay, Seebeck coefficient goes really low with your doping of other elements in place of SN in the compound. Interestingly, even the thermal conductivity is reduced. This is a good result, because if the ZT has to come down, the thermal conductivity in the denominator has to come down. And with these dopings, thermal conductivity is reduced to 50% from what is found in SNSE. So what exactly has happened? How is this doping different from that of copper? Why is so much drastical difference that we see in these elements? The answer lies in the ICP measurements that one does to find exactly how much indium, how much cobalt, how much SN, how much Se is there in our composition. And when we do this kind of an analysis, we find that, okay, we were planning to make SN and Se, but you see SN-Se always forms with some deficiency of SN. Okay, it should have been 1:1 ratio, but what we find is 0.94:1 ratio. This is generally true for SNSE and is considered as one of the reasons for it showing the p-type nature. But what happens with cobalt, nickel or indium addition is that this total does not add to this 94 or 95%. We see further decrease in the cation vacancies, cations. So it implies is that we have a cation vacancy in this system. So when you try and dope these materials, it leads to cation vacancies or point defects in this material. And because of these defects, there will be thermal scattering of phonons, and those scattering of phonons are the ones that are bringing down the thermal conductivity by a large extent. That we can understand for the thermal conductivity. What happens to the electrical conductivity? Well, what happens is that even your gap is getting affected because of these defects. Your optical gap, if you try to do a normal reflectance, UV visible reflectance, you find that the absorption coefficient is drastically changing, or the variation is there in the gap values. Energy of the gap is changing, it is decreasing. What it all tells us is that when you put elements like cobalt, nickel in these material, these are basically D bands, so highly directional D bands, and they add in the band structure of SNSE, which has, like, you know, the SN states are the green bands here and the SE states are the orange band shown here, and it's a direct gap semiconductor. Optical spectroscopy tells us that it's a direct band gap. But if you try and see, when you put cobalt or nickel, they are basically, the D band gets added below the Fermi level. It forms a highly localized sort of peak in the density of states, which is acting as a level to trap the carriers. Okay, it is acting, it's localizing the charge carriers, When the charge carriers try to get excited across the band, there is an additional level because of these dopings that actually trap the charges, and that is giving rise to the lower electrical conductivity in this material. So we saw what happens with copper doping and cation doping. Now let us see what happens if you do not have the stoichiometry of SNSE. See, we realized in this, when we were trying to dope the other materials, we realized that SN to SE ratio is never staying as equal to 1:1. It is always showing that SN is less. So if one looks at the phase diagram, if you try to put one Se atom and one Sn atom and try to make SnSe, then the phase diagram tells us that you need at a particular temperature to make this material, but there is a chance that it will go either in a Se deficient, Sn deficient region and form slightly P type of SnSe, or if you take more SN and try to synthesize it, then you will end up getting SnSe2 type of a system as well. So, you know, both sides, it's a kind of a game to get one stable compound, because these materials are known to have two stable SnSe phase and SnSe2 phase. So depending upon the ratio of SNS to Se, one gets a p-type or an n-type material, and also the chemical stoichiometry of these elements depends on the type of properties it will show. Interestingly, this SnSe2 is also a thermoelectric material, but has a lesser thermoelectric or a lower quality of thermoelectric properties compared to pure SnSe. So the idea is that if you have this SnSe and SnSe2, like if you take a big matrix of SnSe and try to have some regions which are SnSe2 rich, then the phonons that are propagated would get scattered at these secondary phases, whereas the electronic conduction should not have so much problem, because SnSe and SnSe2 electronic bands are not that much different. So I should have a smooth conduction for electrons, but I should have scattering of the phonons. This is the idea, and we tried to explore this idea. And what we did was we prepared SnSe, we prepared SnSe2, and we tried to have the ratio in between changed. Okay, so you take a pure matrix of SnSe, then you try and put in between some of SnSe2 and then little more and then little more, and then your aim is to make 100% SnSe2. When we tried to prepare this in the lab, we realized that okay, SnSe, pure SnSe gets formed, and then as you put in 25% excess Se and then 50% excess Se, you start getting the SnSe2 phase. Okay, the other phase starts coming here, the small peak which is shown here. As you increase selenium content, that second phase keeps growing, and when it is 100%, we expected this to be pure SnSe2, but we noticed that it is, along with SnSe2, you still have a remnant phase of SnSe remaining in this material. And when one does the analysis of this XRD by the Rietveld refinement method, one finds that the ratio of SnSe to SnSe2 phase is changing considerably. Even for an 100% composition of SnSe2, we get some 35% of SnSe2 phase with a major portion of SnSe phase. With this, if I try and do the Raman spectra of this, there also I get that in pure SnSe there is no SnSe2 phase, but in pure SnSe2 phase there is a small amount of SnSe present. Okay, and one if tries to look at the microstructure, then it has remained, the layered microstructure is intact for all this material. That layered structure of SnSe, which actually makes it a better thermoelectric material, is still there. That does not get affected by this kind of change in stoichiometry. Optical gap, of course, gets changed. It's quite different. Also, if one tries to do an electrical resistivity study, then one finds that for 25% of the secondary phase, the resistivity increases, but as you put more and more SnSe2 phase, the resistivity comes down. It is because you, in an SN-Se 1:1 ratio, your SN content is, SN vacancy is 2+, valence is 2+, whereas in SnSe2, your valency is 4+. So when you have a compound which has the combination of SnSe and SnSe2, the valence state definitely changes from that of SnSe, which is seen from this XPS studies. You have a pure SnSe, you have a mixed phase of SnSe and SnSe2, which is showing a shift in the valence states of the Se as well as Sn vacancies. Interestingly, even if one looks at the band structure, though this is not a high resolution, nothing, this is generally an XPS study, so one should not really talk about valence states here. But even if one tries to look the region around Fermi level, then one sees that in pure SNSE, the density of states is less compared to the mixture where the density of states at the Fermi level, the 0 is your Fermi level here, and you see that the density of states for the green curve, which is a mixed phase, is higher than that of the pure phase, which is the black curve. So the density of states at the Fermi level increases with the presence of the secondary phase. With this knowledge, fits in very well with our Seebeck coefficient values, as well as the Hall effect carrier concentration that one gets from the Hall effect. And what one finds is that yes, the secondary phase is playing a role, because our Seebeck coefficient now, which was a p-type material and hence positive Seebeck coefficient, with the increase in the SNSE2 phase, it is going towards the negative value with a n-type of conduction. The interesting property is that the thermal conductivity of it is decreased. So here you have the black curve, which is the pure SNSE. You put 25% of SNSE2 phase in this, and the thermal conductivity is further decreased, which is a very good news. The thermal conductivity decreases, our ZT will increase. Also, the higher percentage of Se, some materials show higher thermal conductivity, but that higher thermal conductivity is still less compared to the pure SNSE2 phase. Pure SNSE2 phase would be around 3.8 of thermal conductivity, but we are getting here maximum value is around 2.25. That's the maximum of Seebeck coefficient one gets for this. So compared to the pure phase of SNSE and SNSE2, we have got reduction in the thermal conductivity. So our idea of scattering of phonons using the secondary phase seems to work. So all the three strategies that I talked about in improving the objective was to increase the ZT is achieved. You dope copper, you get modulation in the microstructure. You dope other elements, you get energy levels being formed in the near the Fermi level, which is trapping the carrier concentration, and hence it is reducing the electrical conductivity, but it is improving the thermal conductivity. In the composites also, we see that we can improve the thermal conductivity. Now comes the first part, which I said I would come at the end, of getting nanostructures of SNSE. Of course, one can get beautiful morphology by hydrothermal synthesis, as you may be knowing. Those who work in the nano field will know. You try to make materials using the hydrothermal synthesis, and one can get beautiful morphology of rods, flakes, flowers, and that's what we got for the SNSE that we prepared using the hydrothermal method. We change the temperatures, we change the concentrations and time of this reaction, and depending upon all these factors, we could control what kind of particles we get. If I see the XRD also, very pure, clean samples were obtained. Stoichiometry was very fine, as seen from IDEX and all, and lattice constant change also was as per reported. Scanning electron microscopy showed us that the layered structure of this material is maintained, and one gets nice flowers, rods, all morphology, beautiful looking, even under a TEM. One gets a nice single crystalline kind of form for the rod samples, or hexagonal kind of crystals we see in the flowers. And the rod flowers showed us two different orientations of the rods. So all this was very pretty good. Then what happens to the thermoelectric properties? Because that is what is interesting. But for that, I need you to know that when you want to measure the thermoelectric properties, what are the three parameters we are measuring? The resistivity, thermopower, and Seebeck coefficient. In all these measurements, I have to take my sample powder, grind it, and make a strong pellet, and that pellet should be dense enough. It should be strong. There should not be any voids or empty gaps or air. It should be a nicely densely packed pellet. And when you try to do a densely packed pellet, you find that the morphology related features of that pellet are lost. Okay, you may still have rods, but all rods are meshed up and held in a pellet, or the flower morphology is broken away and you get a so morphology wise you cannot make a distinction once you make a pellet to measure thermal conductivity or Seebeck coefficient. Resistivity still shows the effect of the morphology, but a sample which is used for thermopower or thermal conductivity, with the change in morphology of the nano, you don't really get to see a change. Okay, so when we measured the resistivity of these materials, we did see a change. But if you measure thermal conductivity or Seebeck coefficient, it does not depend upon the stoichiometry because of the nature in which these measurements are done. Okay. Also, the yield of a thermoelectric material, this kind of material prepared by hydrothermal synthesis is very little. So you have to make the material in batches and batches and batches to get a sizable amount to make a nice good thermal pellet for resistivity or thermopower or thermal conductivity measurements. So what do we do of the nanomaterial then? Do we throw it away or not make nanomaterial of SNSE? Need not be, because it is such a versatile material with a nice band gap and concentration of carriers in it and the type of carriers. It has its own applications because we can see the effect on the resistivity and on the optical gap of this material. And what we put it in use was to make it as a gas sensor. We found that if we make a deposition of those rods or flakes or flowers on a glass substrate, then we see that its sensitivity to humidity is having a dependence upon the type of morphology it has. So rod flowers were having a particular morphology and they were showing a particular resistivity change with the humidity. Likewise, rods and flowers and flakes were showing different kinds of the same SNSE made in different morphology was showing us a change in its resistance and hence could be used as a gas sensor. So with this, I come to the overall conclusions. What I told you was that there is a material called SNSE, which is a very good thermoelectric material, but for practical applications, you need to make a polycrystalline SNSE for large scale technological applications. It is preferred to have it in a polycrystalline form because making a single crystal is a very tedious process and one would have to have a ZT which is higher for a polycrystalline. To improve the ZT, the methods that we tried out were we tried to put in copper in SNSE and we got a modulation in microstructure and it helped us improve the ZT. To check whether copper is the only substituent, we put copper, cobalt, nickel, indium, etc. in SNSE and we got point defects and vacancies and we reduced its thermal conductivity. Same way, when we made a composite of SNSE with SNSE two-phase, we found that we could scatter the phonons and hence bring down its thermal conductivity. And we found that nanocomposites are not a sufficiently good material to check for thermoelectric properties, but of course you could use this material in any other application. With this, I come to the end of my talk and I leave you with this beautiful picture of IIT Indore. Thank you for your attention and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah.
I would like to request Secretary of this Science Lecture Series, Dr. Puneet Misra ji. You must have some questions from the audience side. Please ask on their behalf. Puneet.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, ma'am, for this wonderful talk. And as we are experiencing more and more the impact of global warming, so it is very important to pursue alternate ways to produce electricity, and perhaps it is one of the best strategy to convert the waste heat from the industrial processes into electricity. So your research is really important for sustainable development of our society. So I have some questions from the participants.
Thank you, Vinny. Yeah, please go ahead.
So you mentioned that this material has highest ZT along a particular axis, the axis,
yes,
the single crystal.
Yes.
So is there any reason or dependence on the arrangement of atoms?
Yes, there is a reason for it. If you go back, let me go to the slide where I showed the crystal structure of it. Yeah. If you look at the crystal structure, then along A axis or B axis and C axis, the figure that is shown at the right lower corner here. If I look at the C axis of it, then all the layers are connected. If I just go along the C axis, then the atoms are connected by chemical bonds. If I go along A axis, certain atoms are connected along by chemical bonds, then there is a gap because there is a van der Waals interaction, then the next layer comes. Similarly, in the B axis also, it's one layer upon the another layer, which is held by van der Waals interaction and not a strong chemical bond, like covalent or ionic bond nahi ban raha hai. It is a van der Waals interaction. Because of such van der Waals interactions which are different along the different axes, whereas in C axis you have a direct chemical bond only, there is no van der Waals interaction there. These are all chemical covalent bonds along C axis. Because of this kind of a bonding, the propagation of phonons that happens along A, along B, and along C are different. And that is the reason the phonons, when are not being able to propagate through, because phonons propagate through lattice vibration. Now your lattice vibration is getting affected because in between there is a break due to van der Waals interactions and not because there is no direct chemical bonding there. So your propagation of phonons get affected, and that is the reason in the previous slide of this, that is the reason you have difference in the A, B, and C axis. Of course, at T.
I see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Our colleague, Dr. Rohit, has a question. Perhaps he would like to ask himself.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Puneet, sir. Thanks, ma'am, for very informative lecture. I have a question regarding that densification.
Okay.
How densification perform for these nano form of these SNSE?
Densification in the sense it will be similar to what you would do in any other material.
Hello?
Hello. The densification is done like we densify any other oxide pellet as such. You put some kind of organic binder in this and try and make a pellet, very strong pellet, and you have to anneal the pellet after you have put in fine.
So this pellet is directly made by hydraulic press machine.
Yes, yes, direct. See, hydraulic press will give you a particular densification in it. Ideally, it would be better to do a spark plasma sintering. If you do a spark plasma sintering, then you will have a very good, close to theoretical packing density.
Yeah, that's why I am asking, because for the Seebeck effect, is there any gap or something like that? In that case, we are not able to measure accurately. If only by pressing it, it is not possible to get up to that densification up to that level.
No, I wouldn't agree with that, because what results I'm showing here are basically all hydraulic press. I tell you why there is an issue with spark plasma. The thing is that if you do a spark plasma, you have to ensure that your stoichiometry is 1:1. Many times it gets because you will have a burnout of the material. You can have a silver oxide
there is one more beneficial with this spark plasma sintering is that we can we can sustain the morphology as well as size of that nanoparticle.
Yes.
So that one is more beneficial, I think.
Yeah, but depends again because of the these are low melting materials, no? So if you have a very high current passing,
What is the melting temperature of this material?
The phase diagram that I had shown, because it will go from one phase to another. It will go from SNSE to SNSE2 phase. 1 minute, I'll show you the phase diagram itself.
Okay. In that case, SPS may create some problem.
Yes, you have to see there are different phases also, alpha SNSE, beta SNSE. So in this phase diagram, you see if you change the temperature slightly, you have to be very careful in which phase one is talking about, which phase of SNSE.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you, ma'am. So Mr. Rajesh Kumar wants to ask, do these materials have any role in luminescence applications?
Luminescence. No. I have not studied luminescence in these. I don't think I've not come across any luminescence.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Pawan Kumar wants to ask, what was the particle size of SNSE2?
Oh, SNSE to SNSE2, we did not these are polycrystalline materials. We did not, it's not possible to measure the size. Why? Because you will have SNSE and SNSE2, which will look similar to your in your SEM image. You cannot distinguish the two in an SEM. Maybe if I had to do a TEM, I would only know that I'm having a region which is having a certain lattice constant compared to the other region which will have a certain other lattice constant. But I could not determine the particle size that way.
And you mentioned that the thermal conductivity has two contributions. One is from nanoelectrons.
Yes.
So is
yes.
it possible to separately measure them, quantify them separately?
No, it is not measured separately. It is measured in total, and then you separate out the lattice part from the electrical part, because you know that the electrical part of thermal conductivity is related to its electrical conductivity by Lorentz, Wiedemann-Franz law. So you take the Lorentz number multiplied. You know that the ratio of electrical conductivity to thermal conductivity should be a Lorentz number, L. So you use that relation and subtract out the electrical conductivity part. Then whatever is left is your lattice part.
And one of our students wants to ask, what are the applications of these materials?
Applications. Okay, the application itself is thermoelectric, where you can use it for making useful use of the waste heat. Generally, suppose you had this laptop now that I'm giving a talk, and this laptop is now quite heated, and there's a lot of heat that is generated at the bottom of this laptop. If I had to, suppose I had some device or some material made out of thermoelectric material, which would place some sheet below this, and it would convert some voltage from this waste heat. It would power either charging of my mobile, or maybe it would give me a small portable fan here, which would cool me instead of just sitting here in the heat. Maybe, or it would warm my coffee mug. I would have a plate which it will connect to a coffee mug, and my coffee mug gets heated. I get my coffee is maintained at a particular temperature, and I can drink. So whatever heat right now from my laptop which is going as waste, I could have put it to some use. So these are small scale uses that I'm talking. Very small scale use I told you, but yeah, one large scale use is also people are trying to think of it in terms of replacing our refrigerator system for that matter, because we use all gases which are not good. The chlorofluorocarbons that we use in our refrigerator compressors are not good for environment. So maybe, but this is a big dream. To get a refrigerator replaced with thermoelectric is a very big dream. I just told you a practical device which can be made, and a very big dream also that can be achieved.
Thank you. Another student wants to ask, why does nanostructured silicon has a higher ZT than the bulk silicon?
Okay, two reasons is one is propagation of thermal conductivity, and the other is you have very discrete levels forming. So your electrical conductivity and Seebeck coefficient is basically getting affected. Seebeck coefficient will depend on the density of the curvature of the band. Actually, the Seebeck coefficient will get affected because you see, I had talked about m star when I'm talking about Seebeck coefficient, or effective mass, which is basically the curvature of the band. Effective mass is basically the way your second derivative of your energy with respect to K, the dispersion relation. So these are the two factors that are controlling, that can be changed when you have a bulk form to nano form transformation. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Preeti, ma'am. Dear audience, we heard really a very interesting, full of application, motivational and informative lecture on tin selenide, a new thermoelectric material in town, from Professor Preeti Anand Bhavi of Indian Institute of Technology, Indore. And a very interactive question and answer session. I will request coordinator of science lecture series, Dr. Vijay Rajji, please give vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon to everyone. And I am honored and lucky to have the opportunity to give a vote of thanks on this special day. I particularly like Professor Preeti Bhope's talk, where she explained the basic concept of new type of thermoelectric material from very basic to advanced level. The way she explained was very extraordinary and informative. Thank you, Professor Bhope, for giving such a wonderful talk. I would like to thank all my friends, teachers from CUSB, particularly Professor Rohit Ranjan Sahi Saab, Professor Nitin Chandra Saab, and Professor Lakwinder Saab, and also other faculties from the CUSB. I also like to thanks to the faculties who connected from outside of this CUSB. I must not forget to thank the student who always gathered in such a great number and show their interest in such a webinar series. Finally, I again want to thank the HOD and the chairman of this session, Professor Venkatesh Singh, my fellow coordinator, Professor Budhen Singh, and Secretary, Professor Puneet Misra ji, for participating in this seminar. I would like to thank you once again for making this event a grand success. Thank you. Now I request Professor Venkatesh Singh to allow to close this session and announce about new talk. Professor Venkatesh Singh.
Okay, thank you, Vijay ji. Dear participants and colleagues, that's all for now. We will see you on September 5 on the occasion of Teachers' Day at 11:30 a.m. with another wonderful speaker, Professor Rajnikant of University of Jammu. He will speak on polymorphism in solid. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and keep thinking. Goodbye. Namaste, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
It
you.
was
Thank you
nice
so much.
meeting all of you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.